The first memory I have of Les Zonin isn't a face, a scent, or a melody, it's the sound of porcelain shattering. Plates, glasses, and silverware exploded across the floor like tiny white fireworks, scattering like fragments of a dream. I was 5 years old, barely tall enough to see over the edge of the counter in my father's restaurant, and I froze in horror. Around me, the world of my father, the life he had built with his hands, the restaurant he had nurtured, crumbled in both a literal and figurative sense. The floor was littered with broken dishes and shattered ambition, and my small body felt powerless against the tidal wave of chaos. I remember the terror etched on my father's face as he knelt amidst the wreckage, gathering shards of porcelain with trembling hands. His movements were precise, almost ritualistic, as if scooping up fragments of our lives alongside the broken dishes. He looked at me then, eyes glistening with a mixture of exhaustion, grief, and determination, and said words that would carve themselves into my memory forever. "Sophia, in this business, you either own the restaurant, or the restaurant owns you." That sentence was a compass, a warning, and a prophecy all at once. It would echo through my mind for the next 25 years, guiding every decision, every risk, every secret move I made. Now, standing in the kitchen of taste, watching my staff meticulously prepare for another bustling evening, those words resound louder than ever. To them, I am simply Sophia Martinez, the quiet consultant who occasionally appears to observe operations. None of the chefs, servers, or sommeliers know the truth. None of them know they work under the very person who owns this place, the crown jewel of my culinary empire. Only my lawyer and accountant share the secret. My family, of course, remains blissfully ignorant. To them, I am a failed chef, a dreamer who couldn't survive culinary school. That part of their perception is accurate. I did drop out, after 2 semesters, but not for the reasons they believe. I left because I was busy acquiring my first struggling restaurant, sinking my savings into its revival, and turning it into a profitable venture. While they assumed I was wasting my life, I was quietly constructing an empire, one restaurant at a time. My mother had been the first to voice her disapproval. "You're throwing your life away," she said when I abandoned my culinary education. She pointed to Olivia, my sister, the golden child, the beacon of achievement in our family. Olivia, graduating medical school with honors, a surgeon admired by all, and celebrated at every dinner table. Every family gathering was an exhibition of her brilliance, while my presence was tolerated with the faintest veil of disappointment. But I had a plan, a vision that stretched far beyond their expectations. While they focused on Olivia's triumphs, I quietly purchased failing establishments, transformed them, and either sold them for profit or retained them in my growing portfolio. Each acquisition was executed with careful anonymity. In the restaurant business, keeping your name off documents, maintaining an air of invisibility, is a strategic weapon. I operated through a labyrinth of holding companies and LLCs, ensuring no public record linked me to my growing empire. Taste, now the pinnacle of my work, had been my latest conquest, purchased 3 years ago without a hint to my family. The irony of their continued patronage, oblivious to my ownership, was a small, delicious satisfaction. The previous owner, a traditional French chef entrenched in outdated methods, had run Taste into the ground. The menu was stale, the service inconsistent, and the charm of the place long eroded. I acquired it discreetly through one of my shell companies, invested millions into its renovation, and transformed it into the most sought-after reservation in the city. And while my family continued to celebrate birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones here, they remained completely unaware that I had built the very experience they adored. As I watched the kitchen staff move with precision, my thoughts drifted back to that fateful night of shattering dishes. I realized then that owning a restaurant or owning any dream is about vision, patience, and timing. The lesson my father imparted had become the blueprint of my life. Every plate carefully plated, every service meticulously orchestrated, was a tribute to that childhood memory and the promise I had silently made, I would never let circumstance own me. Standing there, the hum of the kitchen, the clatter of utensils, and the rhythmic chopping of knives were all part of a symphony I conducted from the shadows. To the world, I was Sophia Martinez, consultant. To my family, I was a cautionary tale. But beneath this guise, I was the architect of taste, the silent force behind every perfectly executed dish, every successful restaurant, and every moment of culinary excellence that passed through my empire. And in that quiet observation, in that secret dominion, I felt the thrill of control, of ownership, of vindication yet to come. The stage was set. My family believed in a false narrative, and I held the power to rewrite it entirely. Every detail, from the placement of tables to the selection of wines, was mine to orchestrate. And tonight, as I watched my staff prepare for the evening ahead, I knew it was the perfect moment for history to catch up with them. The kitchen was alive, the restaurant pulsing with energy, and I, the hidden owner, stood at the center of it all, ready to let the consequences unfold. Because in this world, just as my father had warned, you either own the restaurant, and everyone in it owns you. And tonight, they were about to learn exactly which side I had chosen. While my family basked in the glow of Olivia's achievements, I quietly carved out my own path in the shadows. The narrative they had created for me, a hapless, failed chef, was exactly the cover I needed. They didn't know that the moment I left culinary school, I had embarked on a different kind of education, one measured not in grades or diplomas, but in strategy, risk, and the delicate art of turning failure into opportunity. Dropping out after just 2 semesters had shocked my mother, who saw it as a reckless rebellion, and given her endless comparisons to Olivia, she considered it a confirmation of my inadequacy. "You're throwing your life away," Mom had said with that sharp edge in her voice, her tone dripping with both fear and judgment. She held up Olivia as the shining example of responsibility and brilliance, the med school graduate, the disciplined surgeon, the daughter who made them proud without question. Each family dinner became a stage for celebrating Olivia's endless accolades, honors, awards, promotions, milestones. My own accomplishments, even those secret triumphs that would eventually dwarf theirs, were invisible to them. They didn't see the hours I spent negotiating with failing restaurant owners, analyzing balance sheets, and meticulously mapping out turnaround strategies. They only saw a young woman who had abandoned the traditional path, someone who had walked away from education, and thus, in their eyes, from potential. But I had a plan, a long-term vision that they could never comprehend. While they assumed I was floundering, I was methodically building an empire, one restaurant at a time. The first purchase was a failing Italian bistro in the business district, a place the previous owner had mismanaged to the point of near bankruptcy. While most people would see it as a disaster, I saw opportunity. I poured in time, energy, and funds, restructuring staff, refreshing the menu, and creating a dining experience that brought in patrons and press alike. Within 6 months, I had transformed it into a profitable venture, then sold it for triple the investment. The profits financed the purchase of 2 more struggling restaurants, and the cycle continued. I became a phantom in the culinary world, acquiring establishments through a web of holding companies and LLCs, ensuring my name never appeared on any public record. In an industry where reputation could be leveraged or weaponized, anonymity was a form of power. Every new purchase, every renovated kitchen, every successful opening was a silent victory, invisible to the world, but deeply satisfying. My family remained blissfully unaware, their dismissive comments and condescending smiles only sharpening my resolve. They believed I had failed, little did they know I was quietly thriving, orchestrating a growing empire while maintaining the guise of the struggling chef they loved to pity. Family interactions were a constant reminder of the world I had to conceal myself from. At dinners, Olivia held court effortlessly, her every word a demonstration of intelligence and success. She spoke of surgeries performed, accolades received, and patients saved, all while Mom beamed and Dad nodded in proud agreement. My presence was tolerated, a quiet shadow seated at the edge of the table, often near the kitchen or out of the main line of sight. I remember the sting of their laughter, not cruel, but pointedly excluding me from the celebration of their ideal daughter. I could see the pride in their eyes as Olivia recounted her triumphs, yet at the same time, I began to understand the unspoken hierarchy in my family. Olivia at the center, I at the periphery, my contributions invisible. Yet, invisibility was my ally. While they fixated on Olivia's apparent perfection, I was quietly asserting control over an industry they barely understood. Each acquisition was calculated, each investment deliberate, each renovation meticulous. By the time Taste came on the market, I already owned a portfolio of successful establishments across the city, though my family had no idea. Taste had been a family favorite for years, a place where they celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones, yet they remained ignorant that it was about to become the ultimate tool in rewriting the family narrative. Even during casual interactions, their underestimation fueled my determination. They assumed that because I hadn't followed a conventional path, I lacked discipline and foresight. "Sophia, why can't you be more like Olivia?" was a refrain I had heard countless times, a question asked with genuine confusion and unspoken disappointment. And yet, with every slight, I plotted, analyzed, and strategized. Every dismissive comment, every sarcastic joke about my career choice, was fuel for the empire I was building. I learned early that ambition need not be loud to be effective. Quiet persistence often achieves what overt effort cannot. Financial literacy became my secret weapon. While Dad monitored stocks and Mom managed household expenses, I was calculating margins, analyzing cash flows, and studying acquisition strategies. I learned how to evaluate failing businesses, predict trends, and negotiate deals with owners desperate to sell. I was building not just a business, but a legacy, a network of establishments that would one day allow me to rewrite my story on my terms. The contrast between their perception of me and my reality became a source of quiet satisfaction, a reminder that appearances are often deceiving. Through the years, I maintained a delicate balance, being present enough to avoid suspicion, invisible enough to operate undisturbed, and diligent enough to ensure my empire grew. I became a master of duality, Sophia Martinez, the overlooked daughter, and Sophia Martinez, the owner of some of the city's most exclusive and successful restaurants. I observed from the shadows as my family navigated their lives, blissfully unaware that the very establishments they frequented and praised were part of the empire I had constructed in silence. This hidden power became a private thrill, a quiet revenge against the underestimation and dismissal I had endured for decades. I understood the dynamics of family, the allure of outward success, and the shallow definitions of achievement that shaped their perceptions. And with every acquisition, every transformation, I edged closer to the moment when the truth would emerge, a moment when the empire I had quietly built would finally intersect with the family who had never recognized my worth. By the time Taste appeared on the market, my strategy was fully formed. This was not just another restaurant to add to my portfolio, it was a symbol of everything I had achieved, everything I had quietly mastered, and everything my family had failed to see. The irony of their unawareness added an intoxicating layer of satisfaction. They would dine here, laugh here, celebrate milestones here, and not even realize the hands that orchestrated every dish, every reservation, every detail. And I, the daughter they had dismissed, would observe from the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to let reality unfold. Years of patience, strategic thinking, and silent triumph had culminated in this quiet dominance. Every failure they attributed to me, every slight they delivered, every comparison to Olivia, had been a stepping stone to this moment. And as I stood in the kitchen, monitoring staff, menus, and service, I felt the first stirrings of anticipation for the event that would finally shift the balance of power. The empire was complete, the stage was set, and the players, the family who thought they knew me, were blissfully unaware of the drama that was about to unfold. The night of my mother's 60th birthday arrived with all the pomp and ceremony my family could muster. Invitations had been extended 2 weeks prior, including a reluctant one for me. I had received it with polite acknowledgement, fully aware that my presence was tolerated more out of obligation than desire. My family had carefully orchestrated the evening as a showcase of Olivia's perfection, a celebration of the golden child's continued achievements. And, of course, they had assigned me to the periphery, the invisible shadow near the kitchen, the family member who works in restaurants, as Olivia would mock if she had known. Miguel, my general manager, approached me earlier that afternoon, tablet in hand, his expression a mix of nervousness and curiosity. "Ms. Martinez," he began, "the Martinez Group has requested some special arrangements for tonight's private party." My stomach tightened. I already knew what this meant. Olivia had orchestrated every detail. She always did. The main table, 20 seats, perfect placement of parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, her meticulous design of a family hierarchy. And then the twist, delivered with thinly veiled malice, a small table near the kitchen for me. Supposedly 4 family members who feel more comfortable with the staff. A knife twisting deeper than I had felt in years. I nodded, keeping my voice neutral, masking the rising thrill. Miguel hesitated before continuing, scrolling through the tablet. Dr. Olivia Martinez specified the seating. She's seated next to her husband at the head of the table, with your parents beside them. The rest are arranged by preference, various aunts, uncles, and cousins. She also requested champagne service exclusively for the main table. My lips pressed into a thin line. Of course. Heaven forbid the family disappointment be allowed a single sip of celebration. By the time the doors opened to admit guests, my heart beat in a quiet rhythm of anticipation. I remained in my hidden office above the kitchen, observing through the security feeds as my family arrived. Mom, radiant in a new designer dress, practically glowed with pride. Dad followed, slightly less flamboyant, adjusting his cufflinks, checking his watch, absorbed in the details of the evening. Olivia entered with Daniel, her surgeon husband, looking as if they had stepped out of a magazine cover. The aunts, uncles, and cousins arrived, each dressed meticulously, each carrying the weight of expectation and status. I arrived last, dressed in a simple black dress that likely cost less than Olivia's shoes. The hostess, following instructions from my sister unbeknownst to her, led me to the small table near the kitchen doors. You can sit here. Olivia's voice rang loud enough to reach nearby tables. Where you belong, she added with a smirk, adjusting her diamond necklace. After all, you always said you wanted to work in restaurants. The polite titter of my relatives followed, a cruel punctuation mark to her jab. Mom's smile faltered, embarrassment flickering across her face, while Dad buried himself in his menu as though it could shield him from discomfort. I settled into my designated seat, a solitary observer to the spectacle. From my vantage point near the kitchen doors, I could see the champagne being poured at the main table, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, the subtle dances of familial pride and rivalry. Each time the kitchen door swung open, I caught glimpses of my staff, working with the precision and excellence I demanded when rebuilding this place. The irony was exquisite, they were performing flawlessly, yet had no idea the quiet woman at the nearby table held ultimate authority. Miguel approached my table, hesitant and slightly uncomfortable. He knew me as a consultant, a signer of paychecks, yet had been instructed by Olivia to treat me like an uninvited guest. "Can I get you some water?" he asked, voice low. I looked up at him, then toward my family, reveling in the dramatic symmetry of the moment. "Actually," I said, lifting my voice just enough for nearby staff to hear, "I think it's time for some changes to tonight's service." The small table, meant as a place of embarrassment, became my stage. I watched Olivia, perfectly composed at the head of the table, issuing directives, sharing stories of her latest surgical triumphs, basking in the admiration of our family. Mom glowed with pride, Dad nodded, occasionally sneaking glances at his phone. The cousins, aunts, and uncles orbited around them like satellites around a sun, entirely unaware that the gravity of the room belonged not to Olivia, but to me. For 20 years, I had been dismissed, mocked, and underestimated. Tonight, I would begin to rewrite that narrative. Of course, Olivia couldn't resist twisting the knife once more. "Miguel," she called out, her tone saccharine, "could you please make sure my sister gets the special menu? The one without prices. We wouldn't want her to worry about the cost." Miguel's discomfort was palpable, and I couldn't resist a quiet smile. The stage was perfectly set. He brought me the menu, eyes apologetic, meeting mine as though seeking permission. I glanced at Olivia, who watched eagerly, expecting humiliation. Instead, I smiled and said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear, "Miguel, please bring me your complete wine list." The entire reserve cellar. Olivia's eyebrows shot up, her carefully maintained composure faltering for the first time. The reserve collection at Taste was legendary, bottles ranging from $500 to $50,000, reserved for guests who were specially invited and deemed worthy. She, a regular patron, had tried and failed to gain access despite her status. I, the dismissed sister seated near the kitchen, had just claimed it. Mom's voice quivered from the main table. "Don't be difficult. You know you can't afford." I'll have the 1982 Chatula Rothschild, I interjected smoothly, turning to Miguel. A hush fell over the room. Even regular diners recognized the bottle, a $15,000 piece of liquid history, acquired at auction, part of the mysterious owner's collection. Miguel's eyes widened slightly. He knew only one person could authorize that bottle. Right away, Ms. Martinez, he said, a new note of respect in his voice. Olivia gasped. You can't do that. Do you know how much that costs? It'll be added to Mom's bill. I stood calmly, straightening my black dress, and walked to the center of the room, eyes locking on each family member. There will be no bill tonight. Not for the wine, not for the food, not for anything. Silence engulfed the room. I let it linger, allowing each word to land with the weight it deserved. Mom clutched her pearls, Dad's phone clattered onto his plate, and Olivia sat frozen, the shock visible across her perfectly made-up face. What are you talking about? She finally managed. I smiled, the practiced calm of someone accustomed to orchestrating both restaurants and boardrooms. I own Taste. Not just Taste, but the entire Martinez restaurant group, Petit Jardin, Marina Bay, Rustico, Cloud 9, Bro 55. Every establishment you've celebrated milestones in, every restaurant you've bragged about visiting, every reservation you coveted, you've been trading on my reputation without realizing it. The room went silent, disbelief and astonishment etched into every face. Olivia's perfect composure had shattered. Mom's mascara ran as tears slipped down her cheeks. Dad, ever the accountant, fumbled for his phone. And there I stood, the dismissed daughter, the underestimated sister, the quiet observer who had orchestrated this revelation with perfect timing. For years, they had seen me as a cautionary tale. Tonight, I became the lesson. The silence in the room was electric, a tangible weight pressing down on the family that had spent years underestimating me. My calm, measured voice had already begun to fracture the illusion they had constructed that I was the failed chef, the quiet underachiever, the daughter to pity. But now, every carefully hidden layer of my life was about to be unveiled, and the truth hit harder than any insult or dismissive comment ever could. I stood at the center of Taste, near the main table, where Olivia and the rest of my family sat frozen in disbelief. My black dress, simple and unassuming, masked the authority I wielded over the very space they had once considered mine to merely visit. Let me make this very clear, I said, scanning the room deliberately, making sure each eye met mine. I own Taste. Not just Taste. I own Petit Jardin downtown, Marina Bay on the waterfront, Rustico in the financial district, Cloud 9 at the top of the Anderson building, and Bro 55 in the theater district. All of them. Each one of these names is part of the empire I've built over the past 25 years. The words landed like blows, each one punctuated by a pause long enough to let their weight settle. I could see Mom's hand trembling as she clutched her pearls, Dad's phone sliding from his fingers to clatter onto the plate, and Olivia's perfect, manicured hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles whitened. That's impossible, Mom whispered, voice shaky, disbelief lacing every syllable. Yes, I confirmed. It is entirely possible. In fact, it's reality. The Martinez Restaurant Group, founded by Safia Martinez Incorporated, has been in operation for 7 years. And yes, I built it while quietly acquiring failing restaurants, turning them into profitable, thriving businesses, and keeping my name entirely off public records. I gestured toward Miguel, who had returned to my side, carrying my laptop from the office above the kitchen. Please, bring the systems online. Every screen in the restaurant, normally showing menus or daily specials, flickered to life. Financial statements, annual revenues, net profits, and property holdings were displayed for all to see. Current annual revenue across all properties, $35 million. Net profit last year, $12 million. Market value of the restaurant group, approximately $150 million. The numbers were tangible, undeniable. Dad, the former accountant, mouthed the figures in shock. Olivia's jaw had dropped, and her pale face betrayed the panic she tried desperately to conceal. I let the silence stretch, savoring the moment before continuing. All those times you seated me by the kitchen, all those jokes about my career, all the dismissive comments about my ambitions, you were dining in my establishments, benefiting from my work, and yet you never realized it. Every special table you requested, every wine ordered to impress friends, every reservation you bragged about, it was all funded and managed by me, your so-called failed sister. The tension in the room thickened, the family's silence punctuated only by the occasional gasps and whispered incredulity. I could see the subtle shifts, the internal calculations each of them was making as reality collided with their assumptions. But timing, as I had learned through decades of running restaurants, was everything. And the final course of my lesson had not yet been served. I signaled Miguel, who returned moments later with a team of servers, each carrying folders. Inside these, I announced, my voice echoing just enough to command attention, are detailed financial records of every meal you've enjoyed in my restaurants, every special favor requested, and every time you used my name to secure privileges. You'll also find receipts of the Christmas bonuses I anonymously gave to staff you berated or neglected, every tip I added to compensate for your omissions, and every repair bill for the damage caused during your entitled tantrums. Hands trembled as my relatives opened the folders. Eyes widened, color drained, and panic quietly spread. Mom's mascara ran down her cheeks, Dad looked decades older in mere minutes, and Olivia's face transformed from disbelief to stunned realization. The final revelation awaited. And finally, I continued, my voice carrying through the stunned silence of the restaurant, you'll find lifetime bans from all Martina's restaurant group properties. Effective immediately. The eruption was immediate. Olivia's chair toppled backward as she stood, shrieking, "You can't do this. We're family." I arched an eyebrow, allowing the weight of the question to hang in the air. Family? Was it family when she seated me by the kitchen that night? Was it family when she ridiculed my career for 2 decades? Was it family when she treated people who worked for me, people who depended on me for their livelihoods, as beneath her notice? Mom tried to intervene, pleading with a tremor in her voice. "Sophia, please, we can fix this. We didn't know." "That's right, Mom," I said calmly, the cold clarity of my tone cutting through her excuses. "You didn't know. You were too busy planning parties for Olivia's accomplishments to notice that I was quietly building an empire. An empire that now dwarfs everything you've ever celebrated." Olivia finally found her voice, though it wavered. "This isn't fair." I cut her off, stepping closer to the table, letting the authority of the room settle fully upon me. "Fair, dear sister, is a concept you have misunderstood entirely. Let's talk about the 12 times you called my office demanding special treatment, not knowing it was mine. Or the time you tried to fire my manager at La Petite Jardin because he wouldn't give you a table without a reservation. Let's discuss the review you posted online about Marina Bay last month, where you claimed to know the owner personally and threatened the chef. You acted without knowledge, without authority, but still acted with arrogance. Every one of you did." The color drained from Olivia's face, leaving her pale, trembling hands gripping the edge of the table. Each accusation, backed by meticulous records, landed like precise cuts, exposing years of entitlement and condescension. I had built an empire in silence while they had paraded as the beneficiaries of its success, never realizing the source of their privileges. Miguel returned one last time, carrying the final documents and a few bottles from the reserve cellar. I instructed him to pour the finest selections for all tables, including the small one near the kitchen, my table. "A toast," I said, raising my glass, "to assumptions, and to their consequences." Olivia remained frozen, unable to reconcile the sister she had mocked with the powerhouse in front of her. Mom flailed silently, hands raised to her face, and Dad frantically Googled the Martina's restaurant group on his phone. I allowed the moment to stretch, letting every word, every fact, every revelation solidify in their minds. For 20 years, they had judged me by appearances. Tonight, I had ensured that reality could no longer be ignored. And in that quiet dominance, I felt a surge of satisfaction. This wasn't merely revenge, it was recognition. It was validation of every decision, every calculated risk, every silent victory. And as I watched the family process the truth, I knew that timing had once again served me well. Because in the culinary world, as in life, the right move at the right moment is all that matters. The aftermath of the revelation was a quiet storm, a mix of disbelief, anger, and grudging awe that lingered in the air long after my family had been escorted out. The restaurant, once a stage for my humiliation, had become the arena where I had rewritten the narrative of my life. The empty seats at the main table were no longer symbols of exclusion, they were a reminder of the empire I had built, quietly and meticulously, while the world assumed I was floundering. As the other diners resumed their meals, their curiosity softened into admiration once they realized the truth. Conversations buzzed, whispers of astonishment and newfound respect circulating like warm currents. I returned to my small table by the kitchen, my favorite spot, where I could watch the rhythm of my restaurant, feel the pulse of my staff, and savor the satisfaction of a job not just done, but executed perfectly. This place, the one my family had dismissed me in, had become my sanctuary, my control center, and the physical embodiment of my strategy and patience. In the weeks that followed, the calls, texts, and messages began flooding in. My mother left tearful voicemails, professing pride and support, though the sincerity was filtered through years of neglect and misunderstanding. Olivia's messages were a roller coaster of emotions: anger, confusion, and tentative attempts at reconciliation, each message revealing the conflict of realizing she had underestimated her sister. Dad, the ever-practical accountant, sent long emails analyzing my financial empire, offering advice and commentary, as though he could rationalize a lifetime of assumptions with spreadsheets and calculations. I ignored most of it, letting the lessons settle where they would. The empire needed no apologies to be validated, its strength lay in the tangible success and respect I had earned. 6 months later, I opened my newest restaurant, Second Chances. Its name carried weight, a philosophy as much as a brand. The concept was simple yet profound: hire those who had been overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed by society. Former addicts, ex-convicts, abuse survivors, and people seeking a fresh start were trained in culinary arts, taught the discipline and pride I had cultivated over years, and given the opportunity to thrive. This was my gift, a tangible legacy of the lessons I had learned and the empire I had built, not for personal glory, but for empowerment. On opening night, as I stood in the kitchen, observing my staff prepare for service, Miguel approached quietly. "Your family is outside," he said, voice careful. "Your sister made a reservation under a different name. They're asking to speak with you." I paused for a moment, remembering the lonely girl seated at the small table near the kitchen, the one dismissed for 20 years. I thought of the empire I had constructed, the lives I was changing, and the purpose behind my work. I tied on my apron, picked up my knife, and made my decision. "Tell them," I said. "The owner is busy cooking, and remind them about their lifetime ban." Miguel smiled, understanding the balance of authority and strategy, and headed out. Turning to my staff, a group of people who had every reason to doubt themselves but had chosen to trust in this new opportunity, I addressed them with pride. "All right, everyone," I called, voice strong and commanding. "Time to show the world what you can do. Remember what I always say, in this business, you either own the restaurant, or the restaurant owns you." Voices lifted in unison, confident, proud, and energized. The energy in the kitchen was electric, a symphony of skill, determination, and second chances. I smiled, the familiar warmth of the bustling kitchen filling me with satisfaction. Success, I realized, was not about vindication, it was about fulfillment, about building something that transcended individual recognition. My family, with all their condescension and judgment, would remain outside, unable to touch or influence the work I had poured my life into. But for my staff, my empire was a vessel of transformation. The lessons of persistence, strategy, and quiet strength were now theirs to embody. Each plate served, each perfectly crafted dish, was a reflection of the values I had instilled: excellence, dignity, and the belief that no one's potential should be underestimated. Over time, my family attempted to reinsert themselves into my world. They tried using aliases, friends, or third-party reservations, hoping to experience the restaurants they had once unknowingly inhabited as privileged guests. Each attempt was met with polite refusal, a reminder that access to success was earned, not granted by inheritance, privilege, or expectation. They were learning, slowly, the hard way, that opportunity must be seized, not assumed. And I, observing from my seat near the kitchen, felt no satisfaction in their denial, only the steady, calm assurance that the empire I had built could not be undermined by their belated interest. As the months turned into years, second chances flourished. Employees grew in skill and confidence, their lives transformed by the discipline, mentorship, and trust that had been extended to them. The restaurants under my portfolio continued to thrive, each one a testament to careful planning, strategic vision, and relentless dedication. And every night, I returned to my favorite spot, the small table by the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of the finest wine, listening to the symphony of a well-run, perfectly orchestrated establishment. From this vantage, I could observe, guide, and savor the tangible results of decades of perseverance. The ultimate lesson crystallized in these moments: the best revenge, the truest satisfaction, was not in bitterness or spite, but in mastery, excellence, and the creation of something enduring. Success, like a perfectly prepared meal, is sweetest when it is earned and shared with those deserving of it. My family's lifetime ban was not merely punishment, it was the natural consequence of their judgment and underestimation. And my empire, built on strategy, skill, and patience, stood as proof that diligence and quiet strength outlast arrogance and superficial pride. Sometimes revenge does not need to be cold, I realized. Sometimes, it simply needs to be served at the perfect moment, with impeccable timing, flawless execution, and an undeniable presentation. For me, that meant standing at the center of a culinary empire I had built from the ground up, watching lives transformed, success nurtured, and every assumption shattered. The kitchen doors swung open, the night of service began, and the symphony of skill, dedication, and second chances played on. In my restaurants, everyone eventually learns their place, some the hard way, some by earning it. As for my family, they continued to attempt access, only to be politely denied, learning again that achievement is earned, never assumed. And every night, I sat at that small table by the kitchen, sipping the finest wines, absorbing the rhythm of my restaurants, and witnessing the beauty of a well-run empire. I had chosen to build success they could not enter, to create happiness they could not diminish, and to teach lessons they could only experience from the outside. The best seat in the house, I discovered, was not where everyone saw me, it was where I could see everything, quietly in control, savoring the empire I had earned. Sometimes revenge isn't about cruelty. Sometimes it's about excellence, timing, and the unwavering resolve to transform dismissal into undeniable triumph. And in that kitchen, with the clatter of pans, the hum of conversation, and the smell of perfectly cooked meals, I finally understood the full measure of victory.